Thank you, Tom, for the invitation, and also for all the work you're doing down here with poetry, including the series, which are many of which events I've attended, several of which I've enjoyed. Don't do the math. I don't know. No, it's great. It's great work. Pleasure to be here. Also, a pleasure to read before a long time friend and associate Kevin Young, whose first book, Most Way Home, which I probably picked up in 1993, really changed. It was almost like dropping a new lens before my eye, before what poetry was. And sadly lent that book out and lost it forever. But someone's very lucky. So I'm going to move between books here a little bit. One of the fun things for me to do is try to figure out a sentence to explain kind of what I'm about to audiences. I really don't know how to do that, but recently I was listening to a interview by the American writer James Baldwin that he did in a newspaper office in Berkeley in 1979. And the reporter strangely asked him, what's the difference between life in the United States and life in Africa? As if James Baldwin would be an expert on that topic. He came up with this response. He said, well, I don't know, but I imagine people in other parts of the world have a more coherent need for each other than Americans do. And I'm not sure if that's true, but the frame of reference really struck me and made me think about what is the coherence of people's need for each other. It made me realize quite recently that I've kind of been writing about that and kind of living about that for most of my life. So, people's need for each other. It's the first poem entitled Mascolero, which title comes from a Wayne Shorter composition performed by Miles Davis. Mascolero. There's plenty that think we're twins. By 18, we both wished secretly that it was true, and that it wasn't. Since we were 9, we met here on stealth banks of August, each year not the savior, sweet thanks be to Jesus for that old rowboat. Remember my instructions when we met? I bent a coffee can into a scoop to hunt the mud banks for crayfish. The whole trick with blue pinchers getting in behind without setting off a stir on their tail. Now we're getting to be his age. But apart from watches and sky dates, you know how to find me, with my head's full of scuppernong blossoms. So we cast off past wisteria into night silk beyond the river's edge. Empty skins of tree snakes, ash, vibrissa, draw the canopy. Tangles of moss whisk past my cheeks, fall out of a lullaby. No moon. If I spark my lighter, willows young and old pretend they don't breathe in the dark. Don't slip through nights and tangos, Cypress and Saturn, turned into bent underwater reeds. Posed. They stand like a big city crowd at a bus stop. Just reach off the bank for elbow room. Come out that white blouse upside down. You watch open lilies fall away, a bird's eye vision. Come out that white blouse and upside down. You watch open lilies fall away, a bird's eye vision of your daddy's parachute into the Mekong Delta. A back bend arched over the bow. Your bare torso slips through a summer breeze, cuts a hush in the cicada din. Pale gash torn past my lips leaves the night open. Light plays off my chrome zippo. Hershey's kisses harden into rose thorns, dances a shut-eye's faith in taro. My name, dry, salt on an arched smooth eyebrow, vanishes into steamed woods and gut-heavy air for sweat, vanishes into steamed woods and gut-heavy air like a prayer for rain. We take on water, and each Decatur street groan for mercy. It's far too late. Slipway, a damn sight too steep for Esperanto with one-eyed jacks. To pull the moon back with cracked oars, curved like tusks, you better mean it. It's about time for round 2. Oceanus descends within a acetylene tear and dreams of a blue tip, a cool flame. The other eye's been gone for years, blind and blind and lid turned, cold side out. So as Miles had that second quintet that he played with from 1965 to 1968, and all the members of the band kind of slipped in and out of relationships to each other every night in a different way. He wouldn't let them rehearse. He wouldn't show them the music until the night they played it. And he just wanted to see how they would kind of get along there on the spot. And I wrote that poem kind of as a meditation on their movement in relation to each other. Here's a poem from my second book, Labor's Lost Left Unfinished. It's a book that I titled so no one would ever get the title correct. They would do the Shakespeare title instead. Great to be confused with Shakespeare, you know? It's a poem I wrote for my best friend when I was in third grade, Bobby Merchant. And I say that he, nothing we ever did had anything to do with writing poetry or reading. But in a way, at least in retrospect, I think he taught me a lot about writing poems. In that we play catch with a baseball. And he had this great ability where he could throw the ball in the perfect way to make it fun to catch. He wouldn't throw it right at you, but he wouldn't throw it too far either. And he could throw it in this great red zone in between. And I could never do it. I'd either throw it right at him, or I'd throw it so far he wouldn't even throw his glove across instead. And I always admired his ability to do, and I thought it had something to do with the fact he had all these older brothers. And I had these older sisters, and I felt always oppressed by that, you know. So this is and we did a lot together, but he really taught me a lot about how to pitch something, you know, just outside of someone's reach, but not so far outside they can't possibly get it. And its connection to poetry, I think, is kind of clear. Well, this poem is called Lessons Unlearned. Remember what you want to, Bobby. No one taught crayfish to open pinchers into open air when we dropped them from the railing. No one taught the howl in my belly when you and Todd marched them across the noonday traffic on the Division Street Bridge. No one taught real secrets, like how payback runs crazy, yellow jackets tangled in wiry hair. No one taught us not to talk about why Corey stood in shadows and made that low, nasty noise. That we could already draw pictures of anything we weren't allowed to see. No one taught me to hold on to night blue breaths of summer when ceilings fell away, or how to fly, Bobby, through new asphalt and street steam after the rain. How long the sun's heat lasts in rings of inner tubes laid out in the grass. Nothing learned fired my brain at what George Habib caught by the toe, and as far as I figured, no one taught bats to chase tennis balls through a money maze of willow leaves. Who told whip lean bodies they could sweat and tingle in terror, soft as leather wings that swooped arms and legs when we leapt for the catch? And no one by one, listed the million things a day I'd never do by myself. Who could have taught that crowd of boys to chant for your blood, Bobby? Or me to pin your arms under my knees and bury my face where it hurt? Salt to streak a 9-year-old sun-brown neck? Nobody taught me to whisper to you about your mom's mud-knee eyes, green streaked like crime stains on red and white check pants. And no one, not your big, chrome, nude brothers, Bobby, taught you to curse through chipped teeth, laugh till you couldn't breathe. How to follow a baseball shadow through blue-specked oak limbs in the back lot. Or how to throw it, Bobby, just far enough out beyond my reach to make me dive. So, I'll read one more poem from this book, the Shakespeare book. It's a poem I wrote in 2003. I finished in 2004. After I had read the emails of a woman named Rachel Corrie, who was an American political activist, college student, who took part in the international solidarity movement's protests in Gaza, where they would stand in front of buildings that were going to be razed by the Israeli army and bulldozers. And she, in the course of this work of hers in 2003, wrote a string of emails back to her family describing the situation she found in Gaza. And I thought it was Pulitzer Prize level journalism. And I was amazed to read it in the Guardian newspaper out of London. And then, of course, at the end of the emails, I learned that she had been run over and murdered by one of those bulldozers in March of 2003. So I wrote this poem, One Word for Rachel Corrie. It's a 6-part poem, I think. It's also, most of my poems take a kind of musical cue for things, and this one takes its cue from the work of Gilad Atzmon, who is a Israeli dissident saxophone player living in London. And if you don't know his work and you like jazz, Gilad Atzmon is one of the great American, an unknown in American jazz musicians, because his music is basically banned in this country. He can't get a visa to perform here. One word for Rachel Corrie after Gilad Atzmon. 1. I value words. You know me and you know I value words. Rocket launcher. 2. Manjum. 1. Manjum means crazy in Arabic. Rocket launcher. 2. Manjum. 1. Rafa. 1. I've learned to count here. I've seen words shaved down and lined up on their knees along the fence. Incursion. 1. Should be glossy, a lipstick sentence in reverse on our foreheads. Words on dusty knees. Sound grenade. 2. A counter-linguistic device. It's a language bomb. Why is this a word? And there's no word for what you might do with your tongue to get dust out of a stranger's eye. Caterpillar. 1. The sun lifts me through this blasted wall, and the wall, and the rocket, and the sun, and the new ream of paper, and the sound of the shuffle, and the lift, and the fire heat, and the eye, and the laser sight, and the slate green shadow of your mom, and the lock gate of a telecommuter, and a tiny handprint on an asphalt buckle, and a gated Phoenix driveway, and the 8-digit alumni club membership, and a peroxide on Tuesday, and a halftime sales rep in Bedford, Texas, and a clear spot of sweat from the wrist of a D9 mechanic mopped from a union scale tile, and the pulse of sun heat stored in this scrub oak overnight, and white enamel of this skyward tooth in one near lipless smile. One word for that. Yesterday. Just that. 3 nights of that, word in the sun. 3 days of sandalwood skin, sunshine, silent wind, and the smooth scar taste of salt along the ski jump slope of Faid's spine. I've studied this. I have a precise list of the components of a piano player. 2 words, an interval for that blasted wall, and no single strand of an index finger to touch. A chord for the blind glare from a mirror in a sniper's eye. Sing other words over that chord. A comb for lasers tangled in your hair. Watch all the words turn into names. Bend your back and sing. Here, words blow past me like silent wind in a dream. I miss the sound of words. I remember hard rain on the window behind a soft song on the radio. I'm at home in my bed. I know it. At night in Gaza, I can't hear that sound. A word might name a sound known by an anonymous ear. 1. I understand almost nothing. I hear almost everything. I listen and listen. Soft voices replace rain. Hard faces down a missing black plane. I listen for notes of a blindness deep enough to drown in. A dream wind moves underwater lakes in a word-swept dance. I can hear myself slip away, and I'm prepared for the phantom fall. There's talk here about people killed by falls in their dreams. They say, you'll sleep. They say, don't forget to breathe, Rachel. Most dreamers here suffocate before they hit the ground. So, this third book of mine Winners Get to Be Announced. It's a kind of improvised biography of Donny Hathaway, the American soul singer and gospel singer and virtuoso organ player and arranger who was born in 1946 and died in 1979 when he leapt to his death out of his window in the Essex House Hotel in Manhattan. So I, even from a child, been captivated by his music and by his voice. And it was a particular moment in my life where I was living in New York and I heard him on the radio, and it was almost as if I couldn't recognize the voice. And I thought, who is this guy singing? You know, my roommate says, Donny Hathaway. You know, I said, oh, it's Donny Hathaway. And I listened to his voice, and I said to my roommate, I said, whatever happened to him? There's something in that voice. It didn't bode well. And I'm about 25 when that happened, and 41 when I finished this book, and I feel like I was writing it during that whole time in between. The book takes place in a series of interviews, fictionalized interviews with people who knew Donny Hathaway, with he himself, with his wife, people in his band, and so forth. And it's, you know, kind of a wide-ranging perspective of voices on who the man was, what he did. I'll read one of them here. This particular one comes in the middle of the book, but actually arrived last to me, and it's an older gentleman on his way to work in St. Louis, in the neighborhood that Donny Hathaway actually grew up in St. Louis, Carr Square housing project. This older gentleman is on his way to work in the slaughterhouse, where he works third shift. A crew of people have come to interview people about this singer, and they've met him on the street. I read this book in London, and while I was doing that reading, I learned that it's a British film crew that's actually interviewing him in this case. Interview, Graveyard Shift, Carr Square Projects, July 20th, 1980, St. Louis, Missouri. You say you're looking for people to talk to you about Donny Hathaway? What you want to know? I never knew him or nothing like that. You live around here or something? Right here? You don't say. I don't know nothing about that. I'm from down south. Moved up here 5 years back, Florence, Mississippi. I know his music. Heard him sing once. I heard somewhere years ago he was sick. I don't know nothing about that either. Not sick, head sick or something. I went with my first wife, saw him play a little club up in Chicago one time. Forget the name of the joint. He came in wearing a sweater and a thick gold chain around his neck. I remember that. And of course, that hat. Look, it wasn't a big deal. He might as well have been singing on the L platform. Club wasn't nothing but a rib joint with a bar and a stage. He might as well have been singing on 63rd Street. Crowd full of black faces, tired faces. Faces look their age, Jim. We'd all been smoking drinks from before he come out to the club and play, I suspect. Most people pretty high by the time he got on. High and tired. This kind of place where high and tired rhyme, you know what I mean? Women in the audience would call out to him when he paused, and other women would answer them. And men didn't say a word. I know I didn't. Women had themselves a ball, a party, almost like they're watching themselves on stage, and not the men. He'd take your life like he knew he took his own life. He'd wrap it around his fist, lay it upside your head. It's that simple. He'd sing, I'm just trying to be somebody. He'd stare straight at your life, see it like you can't, and sing it like you don't. And there's a bunch of good reasons why you don't hear it sung like that too. I bet there are anyway, because I don't know him. He'd sing, I brought it all home to you, baby. But I've thought about it since. What it comes down to is he stared right at it. Black in this hellhole of a world and don't understand why. Woman in a funk and don't know why. Babies crying in your arms and the mother's going out the door and down the street. A pair of big, rough, black hands and this little baby. And that hurt coming at you because you know you've been down the street when the baby was crying. And you know why you went down the street when the baby was crying. He'd sing a door swung open in an empty room. I remember him singing, "Little woman, hello." There's that song now, Never Too Much. Luther Vandross. You got that right. Should be never near enough, and it ain't even close. You know? Should be nobody's got it enough unless he's on his way to jail. Plenty on their way to jail don't have shit, and they ain't never gonna have shit. That's the long and the short, the nut and the damn shell, Pete. Should be enough already, shit. But that ain't going on nobody's radio, is it? He's singing, one way or another, he's singing that. And then he's spoken to the mic, and he pronounced the words exact. We didn't expect that. Exact. Titles of songs, who wrote them, he'd say, "May God bless you all." He sang some kind of put the hand in the hand of the man stuff next, but he got back to Never Near Enough. And half the time, you could forget the words. He'd hum a verse, have half the room in tears. Then he'd sing, wag his head, peel his voice back till it was raw flesh in the wind. Black flesh. Black wind. It's that simple. He'd sweep down, take it all up in one simple line, blow it out like a mouthful of candles over birthday, like a mouthful of smoke over birthday candles. Simple as that. Black life. I ain't no philosopher. He sung your black man's life. You knew it, you lived it. You even sung it yourself. But not like that you didn't sing it. And not like that you didn't live it neither. Did I say how he looked your life right in the eye? Simple stuff. Little girl, why did you go? I know he sold records to all kinds of people, played in Europe. That shit don't mean nothing. It was black life. You look around. You turn the camera around and around down here. You come back in an hour. You come back in 10 years. It's black life. They can listen if they want. Anybody. People can do anything they want. But that was black life he had in his mouth, his hands, his foot on the pedal. Black man's life. There have been others. Curtis, Marvin, Stevie. They all had their own trips. But Donnie, he stared your life right in the eye. Bobby Blue Bland does that some. Al Green did it a bit. You all probably know this already. Don't know who you're going to show this to. Chances are they know all this already too, because ain't nothing complicated he did. Just stare right at a black man's life. Most of your viewers won't do that. Most of them probably don't come around down here no ways. Some may live around here. And I'll tell you what, no one down here look their life in the eye. Not live to tell about it, they don't. Some do. End up with a face like this busted up curb right here. But maybe his woman might look. A woman might look at a black man's life, stare over at the fence. His woman might look, and she'd tell you all about it. You could bet on that. This love, Jim. And I remember at one point, he stopped the band mid-song, asked politely if we could all be quiet and applaud if we liked at the end of each song. There was a roar of laughter, and he wasn't laughing. I remember that. But I guess I've gone on too long. You probably cut this up some kind of way like they do on a news channel, till it sounds like I'm saying the opposite of what I'm trying to say. That's pretty much happens whenever anyone down here says something to a camera. I'm surprised they didn't send some blood down here for the scoop. You got guts, I'll give you that. Bah! Made you flinch. So that's what I heard. Sat there high as a kite, watched that stocky brother come, sit at the piano, stare my life down. He opened his mouth. What came out was things none of us looked at. Life. I drove home next day, went to work that night. That's where I'm headed right now. I cleaned the killing floor at the stockyard after second shift. Used to be 3 shifts of killing, you know. But the bosses decided to get the place clean each day, give the killing a chance to blow out of the air. That's our job, scrub the killing away. They say the scent spooks the animals. Or maybe it was the union said the constant killing spooks the killers. So I'm not a killer anymore. I never was much of one. Never got used to it. Now, I take a squeegee like the one you use at a gas station, push blood into the gutters. I hose down the bricks. I love the way the place looks in the morning when I leave, all those clean bricks. Wasn't too long. Later on, I hear he's dead. Didn't hear how. Didn't need to. I said to myself, my partner Jay Brown, who works third shift with me. Now, Jay Brown was a real killer. Worked the floor 10 years. Before lunch, he'd wash his hand, hold him under a spigot of blood. One day, he said he had enough to join a third shift cleaning crew. I said, what you doing here in the middle of the night, Jay Brown? He said I had enough. That was about the last thing I heard him say. Shoot, that might have been the first thing I heard him say. Anyway, that night, I said, I knew it, I knew it, I knew it. I said, I could have told you that sure as shit, sure as I'm standing here on this blood-streaked brick right now. I said, don't nobody stare at a black man's life and get away. And Jay Brown, he didn't even turn around from mopping the blood into the gutter. He heard me, though. I know he heard me, and I said it right. Anyone who says he did, he's either back from the dead, bleeding inside and on his way, or he's nothing but a goddamn lie. You go ahead and bleep that one out if you want to. You got a match? A month later, Jay Brown said his cousin Kick had got him a job up in Chicago, laborer with a small crew of bricklayers. He said they go around from town to town, there ain't supposed to be no blood on this job. I said, it sounds good to me, Jay Brown. That sounds good to me. Ain't seen him since. As for your Mr. Hathaway, watch. They'll make a Christmas singer out of him. They'll have my man coming down the chimney. Sugar plums. Thanks for the light. Good luck with what you're doing. I was really happy when he came to talk to me about Donny Hathaway, that particular character. What I did in that book was just listen to the various compositions by Donny Hathaway thousands of times, and in the course of those kind of obsessive listenings, people would appear, and I would just kind of transcribe what they had to say. I'll read one more poem. Well, yeah, I'll read one more poem, and this happens to be the most recent poem I've written. Well, I'm going to read two more poems. I'm going to read the two most recent poems I've written. The first one's called Verbatim. It says a reference to a book of Vietnam poems written by Yusef Komunyakaa called Denke Dao that many people know. Yusef Komunyakaa was a teacher of mine. This poem's called Verbatim. It takes place on 9/11. I taught at a private college upstate New York. By the time the second tower fell, the Humanities Lounge had filled up with staff and professors and students. I stood there and stared into the dust on TV. I was suddenly conscious that I'd spent years coaxing what I saw and heard, charting it as it traveled oxbow roots through me. The dust disappeared the building. As I went through the doorway, Bill said, "It's gone." I left the lounge and walked through the campus, the upstate sky unbroken blue. Kids on the library steps weeping in groups. I'd had a recurring dream where the students and faculty of the college paraded between classes holding their brains in glass jars, suspended in clear fluid. Knowledge acquisition, zero gravity. My thought then, I guess neither approach is much good. Jackson Gardens behind the campus center, I walked through the stone gates, feeling the towers and the dust and the broken glass of bodies pulse in my arms and legs where I'd coaxed the world to go. And I see Tan Han Yen, an exchange fellow in modern languages. When we met, she told me she grew up in Hanoi during the American War. 2 weeks ago, we read Denke Dao in my seminar, and I'd invited Miss Nguyen to attend the class. I bought her a copy of the book and got Yusef to sign it for her. Her English wasn't great. She said it was hard for her to read in English when she missed her children like she did. I asked. She said a boy and a girl, 9 and 13. She read the book and came to class. She didn't say much. She turned to the poem Tunnels and told us that her school had been moved to a village outside Hanoi because of the bombings, and that for the first term, the teachers worked with the students to dig tunnels like the ones in the poem. They were supposed to hide in the tunnels when they heard the sirens from the city. She said, after a few weeks, the tunnels filled with water and rats lived in them, and none of the students would go in. Instead, they stood there around the opening of the tunnel, listening to the sirens, wishing it would stop raining. That's what she said. And she turned to the poem Prisoners, and she asked if this writer was for or against the war. She asked why he wanted to bow to the enemy. And I explained the book's really not about enemies. It's about power, kinds of power, and how they interact. Military, cultural, ancestral, erotic, psychological, masculine, feminine. I could tell she wasn't listening. I pictured her standing in the rain, and I stopped talking. She said, why does he want to bow to the enemy? By the time I entered the garden behind the campus center, I concluded that only a real fool would coax this fucking world into his body like I have. Naive. My legs felt like they were sketched in pencil, and then mistaken, worked over with a wide eraser. I walked up to Ms. Nguyen, and I said hello. I can't decide if the burnt rubber smells come from the city or the scatter of tiny hot twirls of the eraser burning my legs. She's staring to the flower beds that bristle and hum with bees in the perfect sun. And she, how are you? I asked if she heard. Heard? I say terrorists attacked New York City. It's terrible. Could be 10,000 dead. No one knows. And Ms. Nguyen's eyes turn to mine, and she hands me her camera, and she says, will you take my picture with these flowers? I'm still writing about this coherence of people's need for each other. Here's the last one I'll read, I promise. And it's a poem I wrote for my son who was born about 4 months ago, Ms. Pavlic. Alibis for the heavy part of rain that stays in the sky. I've got no every wind tongue or other weird design. I could lie, say you were always on. Bench blue bent toward a hollow sky. One right next to mine. Face pour weather through reinforced glass. I wouldn't say why. Born like that, sunspots run your tongue. Now he's a slip slice of ironite to pass. Could say, last life, you were always right there, strung lost names on your borrowed guitar. Might say he was heavy as thread thin air, but I could say you still are. Or claim barefoot, shoes full of shells, peeled off pistachio stones. His shadow bowed bright, rode round down a dust splashed light. Your Uncle Will kissed a melon on his skin like his sister's cheek. He called it letter from home. Why not? You're all right, right? How about ran over, worn leather, flopped tongue swayed on the frozen concrete, or brass rivets hand hammered? The truth about this? There's some spit shine to beat. So skip the feather, the day we got old, silk band on your hat. I'll see safety blade thin, calling 3 months rent. You know where that's at. Call it what you want, too. Stick around and get back. Where I see it, it's up to you. You count on me. That'll be that. And you'll know it sure as Gimme got shot, too legit to teach to sit or not. And either way, sure as anything you forgot. It's up our backs, around my neck. No need to check. The image has been spit. I'll say, you'll know him when you don't. See him? I don't have to say shit. Never mind, think. What's the matter? Mother's never taught you all to blink? Call yourselves what? You pass him in an empty street. He's got my stomped all on, my swallowed and gone. He's hidden off in the tall weeds of the slow need in case the lights come on. Thanks.